And Kendall, the floor is yours. Welcome and thanks for joining us this evening.
Hello, everyone. So great to see everyone. Really appreciate the invitation. Professor Groves, thank you for the list of read ahead questions. That really kind of helped me sort of hammer out some things I wanted to touch on tonight. Let me figure out this screen share real quick. All right, you guys can hear me okay?
Yep.
Yeah. And can you see UVA battery electric bus update on your screens?
Looks
Very good.
beautiful. Yep.
Awesome. So I tried to get into as many of those questions as I could have, and also explore some other things that have come up in our adventures. But before we kind of dive in, I just want to say, 3 years ago, almost to the date, I knew like absolutely zero about electric buses or any of this, and so I kind of play the bumbling everyman role as we kind of go through this experience. And what you're going to get tonight is kind of the what the bumbling everyman has learned over the course of 3 years of this project. And so I'm going to try to rip through this presentation and the slides. If you guys have questions as we go, please feel free to interrupt me. We can do it at the end. I also have my email address in the end. You can hit me up if you think of something after tonight. Okay. So none of this is going to be a surprise, especially to Dana and Professor Groves, but we at UVA have the charge to be carbon neutral by 2030 and also fossil fuel free by 2050. That's coming from the 2020 to 2030 sustainability plan. And so, there's been a lot written about that. And UTS at Parking and Transportation University Transit Service, when I say UTS, that's what that is. We're kind of the rolling billboards for this. At least that's kind of the way we're approaching it. A really quick look at our current transit bus fleet. These are our current, right now today, 40 buses that we have. All of these are diesel buses. Our oldest are 2007s, and our newest right now are 2020s. So we've been in about a 3-year lull of not purchasing any new buses, and our standard operating procedure has been procure some number of replacement buses every year. And so we try to operate on a 12-year replacement cycle, which you can see in the next to last column. Sometimes we're able to stretch that out to 15 and sometimes as long as 17 years, depending on the bus. And that's a huge credit to our in-house maintenance staff. But you can see if we change nothing right now today with our purchase schedule, we will be in violation of our sustainability goals by 2030 to the tune of some 16, 17 buses if things stay on this track. So we kind of had some urgency behind our electric bus project. We have the total net present cost. We did some analysis once we kind of zeroed in on electric, and I'll get to that in a second. But we did some total net present cost analysis on purchasing the electric vehicle versus leasing the batteries. And so this is where we kind of landed, was purchase all of it. Just get all of it, own all of it. And we can come back to this slide. I kind of probably should have put it later in the order, but I did want to list out some of the other options that we looked into when the sustainability plan kind of came down, and we knew at that point the diesel buses were not going to be viable. We had run previously some mix of biodiesel and had all kinds of problems because of the gel point of that fuel, to the point where, it wasn't just like the below freezing nights when it got down to 12 degrees or whatever, but even in late fall and early spring, the fuel was hitting that gel point and doing quite a bit of damage to the fuel system. on our diesel buses. And so we kind of wrote biodiesel off just from experience pretty early. CNG, or compressed natural gas, is what GRTC runs in Richmond. But we kind of dug in a little bit to that, thinking like, oh, this will be cool. We have GRTC, we can pick their brains, we can learn all about what they do. They've been doing it for a while. But the supply to have that be present at our bus depot in Charlottesville was at a certain point fairly cost prohibitive. It would have required a really strong commitment to that plan, to that path. And so I don't want to say that we have written that off. We're still looking at it for longer term, but for right now, it's not in our plans. And then the fuel cell technology hadn't quite hit that point of saturation where we could say, okay, this is tested and we can rely on this to provide the critical service that we provide. So as cool as hydrogen fuel cell is, and it's really cool, we kind of decided, the 211 buses that are currently on the road running hydrogen fuel cell is not quite enough of an example for us to try to emulate at this point in time. And so with all of that being said, we pretty quickly were able to land on the battery electric decision. And so once we had reached that, we went through a bit of a process. We did not do an RFP process because we did not want any sort of binding contract. And we also kind of wanted to a little bit less specifically, we wanted to kind of thump the melons a little bit and pick the brains of our colleagues across the state and the region. Anyway, we whittled it down to 4 battery electric bus providers, that being Gillig, Proterra, New Flyer, and Arbach. And we landed on Proterra because of the track record and some other things, which I'll get to. So our specific bus build is the Proterra ZX5 Plus, and you can see our ad hoc committee is in that picture. That ad hoc committee was entirely UVA parking and transportation personnel, which is a benefit and a little bit of a curse, because maybe we had a little bit of tunnel vision that we could have benefited from avoiding, but it also gave us much better agility and ability to kind of get things done quickly. Anyway, some of the reasons that we landed on Proterra, they offered near top of the market in range per kilowatt hour. And we learned, I never knew this prior, but we learned that the main reason for that is A, how good are the batteries, and B, how light is the bus. And so the best in range per kilowatt hour was the Arbach, which had by far the lightest bus, and thus by far the least durable bus, at least in our opinion. I realize this is being recorded. In our opinion, that seemed to be kind of the case. And they were pretty upfront about the lifespan of their bus being a little bit shorter than what we were maybe used to or looking for. Proterra also had an industry-leading battery technology. They have their own, I don't know if you guys know this, but they have their own battery facility. They have their own battery company called Proterra Energy. They also had the best drivetrain, the best charging system that was linked to their system. So we kind of felt like Proterra offered a one-stop shop in a way that the other providers maybe didn't. Proterra Energy, as I mentioned, they have this whole set of products to scale the zero emission fleets. Plus, they had been doing it for a decade. When it came to 2020, they'd already been doing it for a decade. So we knew they had kind of been through the battles in the cold weather and the hot weather. They knew their range. It was tested. And so, it was just a lot easier to trust. And through the process, we leaned a lot on our colleagues at Dash in Northern Virginia, and they had a mix of different battery electric buses. And just from talking to them and their maintenance staff, they seemed to feel like the Proterra buses were a bit more up to snuff, if you will, at that point in time. We also had, and this was important to us because we didn't want to have any sort of binding contract. They did have very flexible options for purchase, and what we ended up using is the Houston Galveston Area Council, or the HGAC. And then on top of that, Proterra had, the opportunity to help us with our infrastructure, and they had by far the most training for our in-house maintenance staff for that electric bus stuff. And they wanted to work with us, and so it actually was a fairly easy decision for us at the time. We got some questions about range and warranty, and so I just wanted to dip into those really quick. Talking about the ZX5 Plus, the batteries, we have 6 batteries on each bus, and those will store a total of 450 kilowatts of energy. And we did some modeling, kind of halfway. They're kind of a halfway consulting firm. It's called CalStar. We did some extensive modeling with them, and landed on the 150 to 210 operating range. And then that coincides with about 3.5 hours of charging for a full charge with that Proterra bus. That was an estimated 2.15 to 2.95 kilowatt hours per mile, given our specific route structure, our specific terrain, the passenger loads, like the real life passenger loads that we had, and all the various heating and cooling needs associated with our distinct 4 seasons. Our standard route is somewhere between 50 and 160. And for the most part, it's closer to that 160. I think our average is right around 125 or 130. And so the range worked for us. If the batteries degrade, it might not. And so that's something that we're really kind of paying super, super close attention to now, which leads us to the battery warranty. And what we ended up with is a standard 6-year battery, like full battery replacement warranty. The extended warranty was 12 years, but the cost of that, we weighed the total replacement cost of the batteries themselves against the cost of that extended warranty, and decided to just go with the 6-year. And then at that point, if the bus needs a single new battery, then we would eat the 50,000 to do that. If the bus needed multiple new batteries, then we would probably move on from that bus. But anyway, the battery warranty covers all the base materials, the workmanship, and the battery state of health. Again, there's 6 batteries per bus, and I mentioned the battery replacement cost currently is 50,000. So this is it. This is what we spent. This is what we bought. So we ended up for fiscal year 23. Fiscal year 24, which runs June 1st, 2023 through, July 1st, 2023 through June 30th, 2024. This is what we're spending for our first 4 buses, which are scheduled to arrive. They were originally scheduled to arrive in November. They've had some supply chain issues. They've had this bankruptcy that slowed things down a little bit. And so now we're expecting those buses to arrive in mid-December to mid-January. And that may actually still be a bit optimistic, but we're pretty flexible with that arrival time. We just want to be able to get them in service at some point during the spring semester. Anyway, breaking this down a little bit, you can see that the unit price, just basic is that $829,000. With all of our $53,000 worth of configurables, and then all the warranties and the dealer support and everything, another $17,000 per bus. It ends up being a bit over $900,000 per bus. And we're used to the diesel bus. We're used to that being about $450,000 to $520,000. And again, the last time we bought diesel buses was 2020. So that's what we were used to. And this is double the cost. And so that's a jagged pill for us to kind of swallow. And of course, along with that comes the need for the charging system and the infrastructure, and you can see the breakdown of those costs as well. A mere drop in the bucket compared to the $900,000 bus, though. And I'll talk more about the. Can you guys see my mouse off flicking all around? Yeah, okay. We'll talk more about this specific charging stuff in a second. In fact, the second has arrived. Here it is. This is what we've gotten in our initial order. So we ended up with 3 cabinets, which the electricity comes in off of the lines into these cabinets and is processed into ready state for these dispensers. So we got 3 cabinets, 6 dispensers. A dispenser can charge 1 bus in 3.5 hours or 2 buses in 7 hours. Proterra offers this thing called a station, which is about it's 20 feet long. It's the same size as a bus if a bus were 20 feet long. And so the whole premise here is we take 1 space in our lot, 1 bus space, and plop this gigantic charging station, and it can provide the power equal to 20 of these cabinets, which can power 40 of these dispensers, which is exactly what we need for our 40 bus fleet. There was a question about how much we had to work with the energy company and or the electric company, and we did. However, we have the benefit of working all our projects through UVA's facilities management. And so our project manager for our bus lot and infrastructure did all of that, all of those dealings. That being said, I got a little bit of insight into how that played out, and it was fairly easy. Dominion was very, they had a strict schedule for things, but they were very amenable to lots of different changes and stuff that we wanted to do. And so we did have to get a new power pole, whatever you call those things, pylon, with some barrels. And that cost was wrapped up in the infrastructure project. So, we were expecting all that kind of stuff, and it wasn't super cost prohibitive to make that step, and Dominion was helpful. Now I want to talk a little bit about this bankruptcy. And Proterra has been really above board about it with us. We talked to their, we have a sales rep, obviously. We also have a charging structure engineer that's assigned to our project, and then we have a dedicated customer program manager. So we've been having meetings with those 3 on a biweekly basis. So we're constantly talking, and that biweekly, it was monthly. They ramped it up to biweekly when the bankruptcy news kind of came down. So probably, I guess, mid-May, we started to have the biweekly meetings. We've also met several times with Mike Thinnern, who's Proterra's VP for transit. So any of their bus production, he's the guy. He's the VP. As I mentioned, our initial sales agreement is for the 4 buses and associated charging equipment. And we have agreed to 2 additional buses in fiscal year 25, and we have not yet extended to fiscal year 26. And so right now we're getting 4, and then we're getting 2 next year, and then nothing. And that 2 was because of our own funding, not because of any doubts about Proterra at this point. A little bit about their bankruptcy process. They're seeking buyers on 2 tracks. Track A is Proterra Transit, so the buses, and then also the Proterra Energy, which is the batteries. Track B is Proterra Powered, which is kind of like the consulting on how to put everything together, how to put the puzzle pieces together. And then they have a software system called Valence. And so that's track B. It's kind of the extra stuff that they have as a company. So everything I've listed here is focused on track A, which is the stuff we really care about. The bid deadline for buyers is October 16th. The auction will be held on November 9th. The sale is finalized November 28th. And then we begin to see what's going to change, if anything, for us. In the meantime, it's business as usual, except we're meeting with them more often and we're talking to Mike, whereas normally we wouldn't ever see him, probably. If you want to follow along with the bankruptcy updates, they have a website where all the updates are and all the legalese and all that kind of stuff. And you can see the address there, kccllc.net/Proterra. And so I encourage you, if you're interested, to take a look at that, and you can get into some of the details about their investors and how everything led to this Chapter 11. I thought this was cool. UVA Branding gave us 2 new designs, and our first 4 buses, 2 of them are going to be the top paint scheme, and 2 of them are going to be the bottom paint scheme. What branding wants to do is kind of give us a mixed fleet, like have all kinds of different designs on our fleet, which we thought was an amazing idea. The animation on this slide is a little bit screwy, so I apologize in advance. I'm going to click through it real quick. So our next steps, the construction in our lot is almost finished. Really, they just need to do some drainage work and then button everything up and repave it. So we will be ready probably by mid-October, I would think. And then everything is there in our lot now to scale up to bring in that station and anything else that we would need to support up to a 48 electric bus fleet. So if we end up needing to go with more buses because our service level has to increase or whatever, we'll be able to do that with our lot. And it's actually kind of a small bus lot in the grand scheme of things anyway. So I'd actually be really interested to see us park 48 buses in there. I don't know how it can be done. Anyway, the 4 Proterra ZX5 Plus buses arrive in mid-December to mid-January. We're going to have a ribbon cutting ceremony. All of you guys will be invited. We'll shatter some champagne across the back of the bus and do that kind of stuff. Probably not that, actually. The purchase for next year is the 2 additional battery electric buses and the associated charging equipment, which is it's getting close to $2 million for next year's purchase. And that's coming entirely out of UVA Parking and Transportation's reserves. We currently are not receiving any grant money or funding from elsewhere. And I bring all of that up because that's something that we are pursuing. The plan is to add Proterra's 1.5 megawatt station as part of the 3rd BEV purchase, which would be fiscal year 25-26. I should have rephrased that. But anyway, you understand, year 1 is the 4 buses, year 2 is the 2 more buses, year 3 is more buses, unknown how many, but the charging station would be part of it. And that station would be meaningful because at that point, it's a commitment to our fleet is going to be electric. The bailout is a little bit lessened once we have that station. The 2030 sustainability goals with respect to the projected PNT transit fleet, and right now we're in the process of projecting offsets and calculating the cost associated with that. The thing that I really want to get across to this group is, I know this is corny, but there's 2 idioms that I think really kind of summarize where UVA Parking and Transportation lives with this electric bus project. First, we are absolutely jumping into the deep end of the pool. And I've been feeling that way for 3 years now. So we're trying to swim, we're learning how to swim, but it's still not perfect. And we're kind of embracing all the hiccups and bumps in the road. And then the second thing is we really want to be canaries in the coal mine regionally, to kind of get the electric buses and make the mistakes so that we can then help CAT, for example, when they decide, or if they decide to bring in fully battery electric buses. And anywhere else that is considering doing it too. Like, we want to be the Dash. We want to be like what Dash was for us to other, specifically universities in the state of Virginia. Wow. Shock me, pun intended, with your questions. And then here's my email address if you think of something after tonight and you want to hit me up. And that's it. Ta-da.
Okay, wonderful. Thank you so much, Kendall. I have no doubt we have several questions from folks on the line. So I don't know if people want to do the Zoom hand raising or people just want to chime in this evening. Who wants to start us off? Got a couple hands coming up, so get ready, Kendall.
All right, I'm ready.
All right, Bill. Good evening. Let you start things off for us.
Thank you, Kendall. That was extremely helpful.
Oh, thank you.
I have one question about the bankruptcy and the auction.
Mm-hmm.
Are the terms of the auction such that the purchaser of the company has to accept existing contracts as they are, or is it going to be such that they could modify the contracts, i.e., raise the price, etc.?
It's they're bound to respect any not just even contracts but sales agreements. So that's not something we're worried about until year 3 when we don't have any kind of agreement yet for that.
Okay, thank you.
Great question, by the way.
Okay, we've got another question. Bob McAdams. Bob.
Yeah, I have a couple of practical questions in terms of the bus line. Can the buses be partially charged during the day as opposed to only being full charged as an option so that you could, if a bus were low in power, it could be beefed up?
Yeah, so it's just like your cell phone. If you're at 24% on your cell phone and you plug it in for 30 minutes and you get it up to 42%, it works exactly the same way with these buses.
Okay, good. So then you don't see a need for a high-speed charging station.
We did not, and a lot of other transit providers do because they have to turn it around much more quickly. But our route structure is such that we kind of have that hourglass, like we balloon up in our service during the rush hours. And so if we end up, even if the batteries do degrade and we end up needing to do midday charging, we have a lull in our service in the middle of the day where we could make that happen.
I'm part of a group called Impact, which is a coalition of congregations in the area. And we did an interview with the director of the Blacksburg bus system.
Mm-hmm.
And he mentioned that because of cold weather, they had diesel auxiliary heaters so that they would not be draining the battery. Had you considered anything like that?
We did, and we priced it out. We wanted to, if Charlottesville is a little bit more temperate than Blacksburg, and we did talk to BT quite a bit as well. We opted for just straightforward heat pumps. So everything on our buses is going to be electric, no diesel auxiliary. That being said, we are kind of somewhat down the path of looking at generators in case the power goes down and we still need to provide service. What do we do? That's a kind of a crazy world, those gigantic industrial generators. So bumbling every man trying to learn about that now.
Okay. My last question is, you chose Proterra and you outlined the reasons. Were the other vendors close, or was Proterra like head and shoulders above them?
Head and shoulders.
Okay.
I think if it had been close or if we had been torn, we would have been more inclined to spend more time on it and potentially even go the formalized RFP. But at just based on everything we were able to gather, it wasn't close.
And in regard to CNG, when I think about using compressed natural gas, I think of cradle to grave.
Yeah.
The extraction process to the final emissions that are coming out of the combustion of the engine and that makes for me CNG just off the table.
Yeah. I mean, we had a kind of a split room when it came to considering CNG. I would probably agree with you, Bob. But we had some other people that were a little bit more amenable to it, just based entirely on the positive experiences GRTC had. And we had spent some time at GRTC observing the way they were doing it and how it worked for them and how it works for them operationally. And that was intriguing. But other than that, I agree with you completely.
That's all I've got.
Yeah. All right.
Okay. I mean, I have a couple of questions, but I don't want to steal the floor. If anybody else wants to pipe in or raise hand, see if anybody comes up. But Kendall, one thing I'm curious about, you said you spoke extensively with Dash, and you talked also a bit with Blacksburg Transit. Wonder if you can give us briefly both positive as well as cautionary notes you might have heard from those entities that are a little bit ahead of you in the process on electric buses.
So the bus selection process isn't only focused on, does the electric battery thing work? A lot of what we learned from especially Dash was, if you're dealing with new flyer, here are the hangups that you may encounter with your bus build. All kinds of other stuff like video displays. I mean, it's just stuff that's inherent to their bus build, even if it were going to be a diesel bus. And so there's some of those things that we learned that helped guide us a little bit. We have some very specific desires for our bus fleet at UVA, because we're very much in a condensed kind of 5 square mile radius. In a way, a lot of our routes are kind of like airport shuttles. It's last mile commuters for the health system and things like that. And so we learned from Dash. We kind of stacked our routes against some of their routes to find like 1-for-1 comparisons, and they were able to give us some performance data based on that. And that actually helped us a lot. That helped guide us toward Proterra a lot, because the specific ways that we know we need to use our buses, they had an easier time handling. And their maintenance record on that specific type of usage kind of fit better with what we were able to accomplish. BT, it was mostly just share all your horror stories and let's learn from that. And they had some of the same stuff. Like we didn't like how their bus build was limited in XYZ, and the electricity, the battery electric part was pretty even. But it was kind of like when you use this other manufacturer, then you're on your own to figure out the infrastructure. Whereas with Proterra, they had their own engineers. They would deploy all their own stuff that they could give you. And, it would just made it a lot easier for us. And we're lazy, so we wanted to go with the easiest.
Well,
we wanted to use the easiest.
Lazy or getting started, right? I mean,
yeah,
maybe as you gain experience over the years, you're willing to branch out, but
exactly.
It sounds like you've appreciated having Proterra there holding your hand.
That's definitely true.
Initial transition. Okay. We do have time limitations, but we do have a couple hands. Let's see if we can get maybe a couple more questions before we finish out this segment. Bill, you had your hand raised again. Yeah.
Yes, I did. Ken, I just wanted to mention, in support of what Bob was saying, the Union of Concerned Scientists did a comparative study of greenhouse gas effects of the CNG versus diesel, actually.
Yeah.
And in many parts of the country, CNG was worse than diesel. Not by a lot, but by small.
Yeah.
There were other parts of the country where it was a slight improvement. But the point is, it's not a clean fuel. I mean, it just isn't. And I hope that people will bear that in mind. So.
Yeah, thank you for that, Bill.
Yeah, maybe just one last question here, Marcia.
So did you look into Gillig at all? I ask because Gillig is the city's or that's who they buy their diesel buses from, and they had a horrible experience with the very first Proterra bus. So I can't imagine them being willing to go back to Proterra. Um, Tell me about what you did or didn't do with Gillig, please.
Yeah, so we have 40 Gillig buses in our lot today. And so our preference going into this process was Gillig would nail it and we could just keep Gillig buses and all our spare parts would work and all our mechanics would know exactly how to fix everything. And so we had a pro Gillig bias. The
Yeah.
problem with Gillig is their frame is so heavy that the range was low, and their solution for that was to add more batteries. And so, just in talking to them in our cursory conversations, we had some kind of, we can't go below this range. Like it just won't work for us below this range. And their answer to that was, all right, well, we have a plan. It's not ready yet, but we have a plan to add a 7th, 8th, and 9th battery to the bus. And at that point, I think at that point we philosophically went away from Gillig.
Okay, got it. Thank you.
Their price was going to be $50,000 per battery. So their price was going to be so much more that, it just, we didn't get the warm fuzzies. I'll just say that.
Kendall,
Thank
quick
you.
question, and then maybe we'll close things out here. If we think about the city, I think they have access to potentially federal funds to help
Yeah.
underwrite these costs. Does UVA? I mean, I don't remember quite how UVA does or doesn't interface with federal transit dollars.
We don't interface very well because the FTA regulations and stuff.
Okay.
We're trying to get creative. We're working with Virginia Clean Cities in that effort to get creative. Because right now we don't have funding to keep up with the fleet replacement pace that we need.
Yeah.
And so that's what we have a new director. His name is Scott Silsdorf. That's one of the things that Scott has on his kind of like urgently need to start working on this menu.
Yeah.
I guess I'll be working on it too, probably.
Okay. No, I mean, I think it's commendable that you all have jumped into the deep end and have figured out, at least initially, how to absorb those costs. But yeah, certainly it occurs to me, if you don't interface with federal transit dollars very well, going from 6 to 40 at that price point, I don't know, maybe the BOV is going to write you a big check, but I wouldn't hold your breath.
It's a spicy meatball. If we have a bake sale, can we count on you guys to come buy some cakes and cookies?
All right. You'll probably get some takers on that.
Yeah.
Kendall, thank you very much.
Thank you, guys.
This was a very informative talk. Appreciate your energy. Lots of high energy here, which I think you may continue to need in the months ahead. So I know I and others will be looking out for the announcements on the ribbon cutting and everything. It's as neat as anything to know your timeline on things. So be looking for those sharp looking buses here in the months ahead.
Oh yeah. Thank you so much, Professor Groves. Thank you, guys.
Thanks so much.
All right. Round of applause for Kendall. Kendall, thanks for your time this evening. Super. And we're going to continue to move on with our agenda here tonight.
All right, guys. Have a great evening.
All right. Thank you.
Bye-bye.